Hi, everybody. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs, and I'm the host of the Sports Psychology Hour radio show every Sunday morning here in Kansas City. It airs from 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time. It can be heard live on 810WHB.com. And over the past few years, in addition to my show, which I've done for 33 years, we've started the Sports Psychology Hour as a podcast now via live stream. So you can go to my website, which is winnersunlimited.com, click on the podcast tab, and you can listen to all kinds of episodes. We've got close to 10 years of podcasts on there, all kinds of stuff. I have interviews with people from all over the place in the world of sports. And we're doing a new series of conversations now focusing on coaches and athletes. And tonight, I'm very privileged to be talking with Kristen Rupprecht. She's the executive director of Noble One. So, Kristen, thanks for joining us tonight from Denver, Colorado. I appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, your work and what you're doing. We're going to talk about emotions and kids and coaches. You've got your own philosophy that chimes in with mine on all this. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this and what excites you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I launched Noble One in 2020, just as a coaching company and specifically focused on youth. And it came from kind of my own life experience where I went through some mental health struggles. I lost a family member to addiction. And so within my own kind of healing journey, I really started to look at what I had learned as a kid and more importantly, what I had not learned. And a lot of it was around like emotional awareness, how to really change some of my beliefs and behaviors and things that I kind of felt like were the foundation of having, being healthy, mentally healthy. And so for me, struggling with depression was one aspect of it. For the family member, it was addiction. And I believe addiction is kind of a byproduct of a mental health issue. So when I came out of all that, I really had this passion to want to give back and want to help. And I felt like where I could really make an impact was with youth, because this is something that it's not taught in schools, maybe a little bit more now. They're calling it social and emotional learning, but I still don't think we've completely shifted the paradigm. So that's what my company is about. It's really going back upstream and talking about these things from a preventative standpoint. How do we get kids to know how to process emotions, to know how to use their voice, to set boundaries, to understand, other people's emotions, read the room, have healthy relationships, and all the things that adolescents struggle with. If we put a little bit of context and teaching around it, I think we could really shift and turn into more of less response to crisis. And I feel like sports is really a great place to lay some of this foundation because there's so many things being taught in youth sports like leadership, teamwork, communication, like all the same things that I teach from an emotional perspective. And it's a really great way to embed it, I think, into the youth sports culture, but I don't see it really being done.
Mental health is something I've talked about my whole time on the radio. I started in 1992. And I've emphasized the importance with athletes and coaches and kids all the way down from the professional Olympic level down to youth sports. Why mental health is so important. Why dealing with emotions and feelings and understanding them it's imperative to success. And forever, I was told what I was full of, which I won't repeat on this show, but people didn't want to deal with it. Oh, come on, doc. The athletes, they're strong people. They can deal with all this stuff. I say, hey, they're still people. I mean, I just talked to a Major League Baseball player today who's struggling with some issues. And he's like, Doc, I've got to talk to you about this as much as I can because I need to get through this because it's affecting not only how I play, but just how I feel about myself. And
Yeah.
now we're seeing with most of the professional sports leagues, and not all, but a lot of the collegiate teams, they're bringing on mental health professionals, people to work with the psychological aspect, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of dealing with who they are as people. And
Yeah.
that's so important, right? I mean, that sounds like that's really where what you're trying to emphasize.
Yeah, it's pressure. And I have a number of friends. This seems to be a common story is like the kid that, played baseball his entire life. He started playing at like 3 years old, all through high school, all the travel teams, and then gets to get his break either in college or right after college going into the majors, tears the rotator cuff, right? And then completely devastated, falls apart because that's all they knew their whole entire life. There was no like foundation built to how to handle something of that magnitude. And a lot of them end up being such a similar story. Like they go down mental health issues or alcoholism or gambling or whatever to escape this devastating, I guess, failure. But it's the pressure. And so, I mean, I'm guilty. I started putting my kids in sports at the age of 5. Maybe it's 3 now, but still, it's the thing you hear as a parent is put your kids in sports because it'll keep them out of trouble, right?
Well, let me ask you, when you put your kids into sports, why'd you do it? What was the incentive? What was the rationale behind it?
Well, back then I did it because I was trying to help figure out what they liked and what they didn't like, And I guess I had enough awareness to see I had 2 sons, like one of them, let's try them both in all the things. Like one of them, like soccer, he couldn't pay attention. He was out there playing with, like the grass and whatever. That wasn't his thing, where it was for the other. And so I had enough awareness to say, okay, he seems to like that sport or doesn't like that sport. But I also remember then getting caught up in the pressure, right? It's like, oh, well, if you want your kid to play in high school, you better get them on all these travel teams, or you better hire them a personal this or that, or you're getting on them. Why aren't you practicing enough? And you need to get out in the yard and throw the ball, or they get in the car and it's the lecture. So there's just so much pressure, I think, on kids these days to I don't know, be high performing in everything they do, whether it's sports, academics, all the things.
I don't think most parents really even realize there are more scholarship opportunities aware are available in academics than there are in sports. And if
Yeah.
people really looked into that, they probably spend more time with the educational aspect than the sports world. But education is boring for a lot of people. Sitting and reading a physics book is not as exciting as going and shooting a basketball or hitting a hockey puck or swimming. So, I mean, I love sports. I played sports my whole life. I'm going to be 70 years old this year. And as long as my body holds up, I'm going to keep doing stuff. But the fact
Yeah.
of the matter is, I mean, I love the excitement of competition, of pushing myself to do things. I've done it since I was a kid. But when I started playing, it wasn't until, back, if I recall correctly, some of my friends started playing Little League Baseball in sixth grade when we were about 11 or 12, not at 4 and 5. And you brought up the rotator cuff issue today, and there's been a lot of talk about this lately about how many professional pitchers at the minor league, collegiate level, all the way up to the majors are having arm surgeries because of overuse injuries because they've been pitching, throwing balls since they were, like you said, 3 or 4 years old.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so one of my big words is balance, Kristen, that I work with people on. How do you balance everything
Yes.
out?
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that in regards to that word?
I mean, as a coach, like I working with kids, and then I also have teen coaches that work with other teens. And we really are kind of a holistic approach, right? So it's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's the balance to me comes from all areas. It's not, physical health seems to be the main focus, but I think mental health, emotional health, spiritual health is equally as important and social skills. So when I'm working with kids one-on-one in a group, I have a curriculum that's kind of to touch on all those points and really balance out what we're teaching kids and then also give them applicable skills that they can learn, that they can take that are simple, that they'll remember and kind of carry with them through life when they run into situations. Teaching them, how to set goals, how to handle conflict. What does courage mean? I mean, there's just a whole multitude of different topics, but it is for exactly that, to help them find a balance and also to help them find, I don't know, what's their true north. I've talked to some kids that, the parent will call and say, I'm really concerned. My kid doesn't, this just happened actually. It was a kid that normally had been playing baseball, in the summer, and all of a sudden this he doesn't want to. And so the mom is taking that as, there's something wrong with him. She can't get to the bottom of it. Well, when I hooked him up with the coach, and they were able to connect on the issue, he's just going through a lot. His parents just went through a divorce. He's dealing with emotional things that are kind of isolating him. Therefore, it's like he doesn't want to put himself out. He's just not in that frame of mind to play sports. So let's work on his emotional stability. Let's get that balance. Let's give him some coping mechanisms there. And then let's try again next season, right?
How do you, well, let me ask you, that's a great way of pursuing it. But how do you get a young athlete to understand that? Because that, of course, that's what I have to do with so many people. I co-wrote this book, Just Let Them Play, Guiding Parents, Coaches, and Athletes Through Youth Sports. And my favorite chapter is Embracing Failure Can Lead to Fun. Because no matter what you're going to do, you're going to fail at things. And that could be you're not doing well playing your sport, doing well in school, doing well in a relationship. And that takes us to the whole emotional component, like you're talking about, doesn't it?
For sure. And I think what we teach kids, certainly what I was taught, there's this external focus on everything to be good in sports, to be good in school, to have a lot of friends. There's so much pressure on teens, kids in general. But what I would say, and what scares a lot of people when I say it is, I'm the person that's going to give you permission to feel. Like you get to feel, you get to go through rough patches. You get to be sad if your parents are going through a divorce. You get to feel like giving up if your grades are down, but it's helping them to allow those emotions to be there and then also giving them a tool. Like I have something called the Noble One method that helps kids process their emotions kind of in real time. Um, to sort of walk them through. It's like getting out of the head and into what's this belief I'm believing. I didn't do good on one test, so that doesn't mean I'm a failure in school. It just means it was that one test. But it's giving them the awareness around things like that. And then permission. Permission. It's like you get to take care of yourself first before you can be good at all these things that you're expected to be good at.
Where does this topic fit in with all this? The word perfection. Okay. Because, yeah, I'm glad you laughed at that. Because I
Uh,
get,
yeah,
I go,
go ahead.
and I get all these young people that come to my office. Like I just had a new client last week who is a basketball player, and he is in middle school, very talented. His dad runs camps with a bunch of college kids who have gone on to big time D1 schools. So he's got accessibility to all these great players. And when the dad said, I want him to come talk to you, when he called me on the phone, he says, my son cannot deal with the fact that he's not perfect because he works out with a lot of these college level kids. And he's this training place that he's at, there's all levels, but because he's so good, he tends to gravitate towards the older kids. So when the young man came in last week, I said, why are you here? He goes, because I'm not perfect. And I said, well, who is perfect? And he goes, well, nobody. I said, okay,
Yeah.
so if nobody's perfect and you're not perfect and you're upset about that, how are you going to be happy? And then he looked at his dad, looked at me, and he started to cry. I mean, not sobbing, but tears came out of his eyes. He
Yeah.
says, are you saying I can't be perfect? I said, well, nobody is. Because I said, Kobe Bryant broke what record 2 years before he retired? And he actually got it right. Most missed shots in the history of the NBA, and he played 2 more years. I don't care what you do, you're going to fail. You're going to screw up. And I think today, with especially starting these kids at such young ages and pushing them to be so good that the word fun has gone out of it. And consequently,
Absolutely.
then the burnout comes in. I mean, what are your thoughts on all that? That was a broad statement there, but what do you think?
Well, when you said the word perfection, it's like I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. I don't know if I'll ever.
Wait, can I quote you on that? That's a great term.
Yeah, so I'm in recovery for perfectionism, and I've analyzed it and I deal with it a lot because it's a coping mechanism, right? For me specifically, and I think for a lot of kids, it was like I was trying to avoid conflict. In my household, my brother caused a lot of conflict with my parents and upheaval. And I was the sensitive empath and I felt it like, oh my God, they're yelling at him. I don't want that. So I'll just be perfect. right? I won't cause any problems. I'll do everything right. Then my parents won't get mad and upset at me. And I took this upon myself and it so backfired on me later in life. And it ends up becoming about control. And you're always putting yourself up against other people and what society says you should be doing. And, in terms of kids, it's like, oh, nowadays it's like social media. It's just like this big comparison project for kids. And so again, I would say we have to get kids to understand exactly what you said. I think you handled it perfectly. Like there's no such thing as perfection. It's really about self-love. Who are you comparing yourself to? You're on your own path. You're not on the same journey as anybody else. So, but you have to bring it into perspective and in terms that they can understand. If
Mhm.
nobody ever really talks to you about it, you don't know.
You're hitting on something. When I do these shows, my mind starts going off on these different tangents from
Yeah.
what the guests will say. And so I'm thinking about relationships that start obviously in the family, then you go into school and sports and as you grow up. And so much of the relationship to me is about communication. And I have a saying, a good coach is a good communicator, a great coach is a good listener. And I found that when really excellent coaches take the time to understand why is this young girl or young boy on my team? Well, are they here because their friends are here? Are they here because they want to get better at it? They're here because mom and dad are making them play. So how do I make it fun? There's that word fun. Remember that? We used to have that word fun when we
Yeah,
played,
I
right?
know.
Yeah. I try to do that when I'm playing golf still at my age, but it's a problem. But that's a whole other issue. But with youth sports, it really should be about fun and learning skills, not about winning. But
Yep.
but we spend so much time on winning and losing that these kids get all distraught. Have you dealt a lot with that?
Oh, absolutely. And like we remember the rides home in the car, right? When the kid's sitting in the back seat. And the minute they get in, it's like not only did you just get like annihilated by your coach because you didn't play the game that you practiced to play all week, like twice a day, 6 days a week, right? And then you get in the car and then the parent starts, so what'd you think of the game? And like there's just no time for the kid to process all of that.
And they're 10 years old.
Absolutely. And
Right.
and you don't think they're beating themselves up, and then you start to lay into them too. So I think it's just, but to what you said, like it isn't just about winning. And it's like, but what you can teach kids through sports starting at a young age is life is going to throw you wins and losses. There's no way you're going to win all the way through life. And so what did you learn? How could you do better? What were the highlights? What did the team do well? What are things that we could still work on? Like you give them the tools so that they can then take those later in life and say, "Oh wow, like this is just like when we would play sports. I had a loss, I lost a job, I'm losing a relationship." You can use those same coping skills.
Before we come on the air, we were talking about youth sports and how the burnout rate is so high. We're
Yeah.
seeing close to 75% of kids are burning out by the time they're 12 or 13. Well, like I said, when I was growing up, we didn't start playing. Like I started playing tennis around 8, and it was fun for me. And when it sort of got important was 12, 13, 14 years of age. But now you're having kids burning out by that time because they start at 4 and 5, and it's
Yep.
not fun anymore. So, what do you think we can do to bring fun back into youth sports and make that a priority? Because so many prominent coaches that I've talked to over my career will say, Doc, this youth sports stuff is crazy. They need to not keep score, not worry about points or numbers until they're 12 or 13. Up until that point, should be just learning the skills, having fun, getting better, understanding success and failure, winning and losing. Learn about what when you strike out, figure out why you struck out, not get yelled at by a coach because you struck out. You know, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. If it were me, I'm gonna say I believe the person that's in the lead is kind of in charge of setting that tone. So the coach, right? I don't whether you're coaching 5-year-olds middle schools, high school kids, collegiate athletes. As the coach, you're the leader. So it's your job to establish the baseline. And that would mean bringing in, with the kids, with the parents, with the other coaches, what are we going to commit to in terms of fun? So now, fun for 5-year-olds would be a lot easier with the drills that you do and all that. But as you get older and more competitive, I coached my older son actually in soccer up until he was like 12 or 13. And one of the things that we would try to do is like, let's bond, let's get the kids together off of the field and do fun things, right? So whether it was a sleepover or a spaghetti dinner or go ride go-karts, do something that wasn't always just about the sport and winning, but was also building kind of that bonding and the interpersonal relationship amongst the kids as well, getting the parents to know each other. But I think it's really about who's leading. I mean, it's no different than in corporate America. If you've got a manager that sucks, that isn't making your job fun or communicative, it's a miserable place to work.
So how do we, so, okay, so going on that, what you just said right there,
Yeah.
how do we educate coaches, okay, about all this? Because, I have, in my 43 years of work, I've had tons and tons of kids come in my office who have had their self-confidence has been destroyed by egocentric coaches who are
Yep.
all about winning and beating everybody, and the fun aspect is not there anymore. Even at 8, 9, 10 years of age. And so I think this goes back to, educating coaches, but also educating parents too, right? About, if you're gonna sign your son or daughter up for a team, and maybe it's the local team at your grade school or middle school, junior high, okay, find out a little bit about that coach's background. Find out about what's their philosophy about winning and losing, success and failure, and about having fun. Are they there because we're here to win the championship and that's our goal? Or are we here? We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to learn skills. We're going to get better. So, what would you say to parents who want to sign their kids up for a youth sport?
Yeah.
What should they look for, and what do you think they should do?
That's it's as you were saying that, I was thinking like, yeah, I would say could a parent actually interview a coach? Maybe in some cases,
Why
but
not? Why not?
yeah. Yeah, a parent could interview a coach. Coaches should have to go through some sort of a curriculum and training, not just, back in the day, and I think it's still this way, it's volunteer, right? It's like find a parent with a heartbeat that wants to get out on the field or has the time to coach the kids, and now all of a sudden you're a soccer coach. You have no skills. You're looking up stuff online to run a drill. I think it needs to be beyond that. Like there does need to be some sort of a process that they have to go through. A curriculum for what we're talking about could wouldn't be difficult. It would just be some basic topics, whether they're online modules, like this requirement to take, just like you have to get like a ref certification or some sort of a certification that says you've touched on these topics, so now you're aware. I'm going to be on the field not only teaching skills that have to do with the sport, but how am I going to tie in emotional leadership skills as well?
So, where does sportsmanship fit into all this? Sorry, I'm loading you up with questions here, but I want to see what you think. Because to me, sportsmanship, before I let you answer it, sportsmanship has to be one of the big foundations that coaches have to really emphasize when they start working with whatever level it is, about fairness, about having structure, about getting along with everybody, and making things work right. I mean, what do you think? And why do we have so many problems with sportsmanship at the youth sports level today?
Because again, I would say it's the coaches. I mean, if you're a good leader, then people are going to follow you, right? If you're a bad leader, it depends on your personality, but these days I see kids are a little bit more rebellious. They don't want to, follow that authority all the time, or you're going to have the kid that's really timid and stuffs it all down and doesn't say anything. So I think again,
Excuse me. Let me interrupt right there. So, which of those two groups, as they grow up older, are hurt the most by that?
the stuffer or the rebel,
Yeah.
the stuffer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, because
Tell
at
me why.
least,
Tell me why.
well, because it's damaging to your whole like mental and physical body when you stuff emotions, you're stuffing it somewhere, right? So if you're not releasing it by being the rebel and saying, I'm not going to take this and move in another direction, you're just dropping it all down into your body, and then later in life something will trigger it and it'll explode, or you'll end up like me with the mental health issue of depression was just this constant stuffing of emotions, running around trying to be perfect but not really letting anybody know that I was struggling.
Yeah.
And so it manifested as depression in my life. So that's what you're going to see.
How'd you get out of that?
Anxiety. Yeah. Say
How'd you get
again.
out of
How did I what?
How did you get out of that depression?
I got help. I
We
got
talked
help.
about it. We talked
I
about
talked about it. I got help. I started to learn, and honestly, like I looked in the mirror and I was like, wow, there's a common denominator in some of these experiences that I've had in my life that seem to be repeat patterns. And so it's taking accountability. Like when I work with kids, it's like radical self-awareness. You got to start to own where you're contributing or contaminating.
what do you do when a parent doesn't want to take responsibility for the pressure they're putting on their kids?
Hmm. You mean in terms of if I was working like with a parent
Yeah,
or
you're
working with a
working with a
kid?
client, you're working with a young athlete, young person, and their parent is obviously a big part of the problem, but the parent doesn't want to take responsibility for it. How do you try to make them aware of their role in everything?
I'm going to say it. I mean, I think at some point you have to say it. You've got to talk about the elephant in the room. And this is the same as me coaching kids. Like a lot of what the kid is struggling with is coming from the parent. These are the same, it's everything's a pattern. They're learned behaviors. Whether you're talking about it or not, you're watching your parents model certain behaviors and you pick them up. And you know this, I used to say, like, God, you go to therapy and they're like, okay, now let's talk about your childhood. And you're like, really? But everything starts there. That's where you learned it. That's where your coping mechanisms were established, whether you knew what you were doing or not.
Yeah, very well stated. Because it comes back to learned behaviors, which start when we're younger. And to go back to what you said about the person who stuffs it, or the rebel, yeah, the rebel will have their share of issues, but the healthy thing about them is they express it. But the ones who
Yes.
stuff it, we see in society today, a lot of these young adults, late teens, early adults who are having big time issues. When you read stories about them, find out their background, they're stuffers. They kept
Yep.
things inside. They were the loner. They're the one who didn't express a lot. They're the one that sat in class and didn't say much. And the ones who were more rebellious, yeah, they were a pain in the butt. They're the ones who people hated. I know I ran into a lady a couple weeks ago at our pro women's soccer game, who I went to junior high and high school with, and she calls out my name, and I looked at her and realized who it was, and she was with her daughter, and she said, Andy Jacobs is a great guy, but he always bugged me in junior high because he always pulled the ribbons out of my hair when I sat in front of him. And I said, yeah, but it was a lot of fun. She goes, yeah, but you did it for fun. If you told me you were having fun with it, and it didn't bother me really, but you always expressed yourself. She goes, I always liked that about you. So maybe that's why I became a psychologist, because I did express myself. But I found that people who don't do that, okay, keep it in, and kids who do that, they're the ones, I think, as a coach. So a coach's job is multifaceted. You wear many hats when you're coaching kids. But one of the things is the kids who are quieter, the kids who keep more to themselves, I think those are the hardest ones to really work with, because you've got to try to find that area that's going to motivate them and pump them up.
You said something earlier too about how kids are getting burnout, because they've been playing sports for so long. I would I think too, because I both of my sons said that, and I don't know, they might challenge me on this, but I think some of it also has to do with, how you're always like, I just remember it was like, are you going to get to play in high school? Was kind of like you're getting groomed for like making the high school varsity team. That's a big deal, right? And gosh, if you can make it as a freshman. And I feel like we've got these kids in sports and playing and playing and playing. And then you get to high school, and that's where you're dumping in kids from, different districts. It's a bigger school, build bigger pot. So now you're not getting to play because now all the politics are there, right? And the coaches have their favorites. And I think a lot of these kids are saying, yeah, I'm just burnt out, but it's the perfection thing. I was a starter on my other team. Now the coach isn't even playing me. That's a hard hit.
Yeah, and I always say, Kristen, if you made it to collegiate sports, you survived youth sports
Oh,
because somehow you got through all that. And of course, I work with a lot of college athletes who are very frustrated because they're not getting to play. But as I just had a session today with a college baseball player out in the West Coast, and he hasn't played in the last 6 games. He wasn't doing very well. He striking out several times, so the coach has benched him, but the coach isn't talking to him. In fact, he said the last 4 games he's played, he was the only non pitcher who didn't get to play. And I said, "Well, have you thought about talking to the coaches about it?" And he just looked at me with a blank stare. Why not? Well, I've never had to do that. I've always been the star on the team. I said, "Well, now you're not. And if you want to figure out what you have to do to get in there, you need to sit down with the coach and the hitting coach and talk to him about it." And he looked at me. We were on a Zoom call, and he just had this blank look on his face. He goes, "Well, I don't know how to do that. I've never had to do that before." So learning about success and failure, winning and losing across the board is important. And that's why I think the kids that are always the stars at the younger ages maybe aren't going to be the stars anymore. So for them, that's a big issue when they move up to the next level because they're one of everybody who's a star. And that's
yeah.
to me what you're talking about there.
Yeah, and what you just said was a perfect scenario of somebody that never learned to use their voice and overcompensated it by being the best. Well, if I
Yeah,
if
because he
I
didn't have to use his voice.
correct, if I just continue to be the best and do everything perfectly, then I'll keep winning and I'll avoid conflict forever. And then the conflict comes up where now he's not playing and he doesn't know how to speak about it.
If I let me stop you right there because that's were you listening in on this session? That's exactly what we're talking about today. Because I said, "Do you know what to say to the coach?" And he's like, "No." And I'm sitting there thinking, "Well, you're not playing. You need to go talk with him." And so he says, "I've never had to talk to a coach about that before." So we went into extensive detail about it and came up with a game plan for him to talk to the coaches. And he said, at the end of the session, he goes, "You're right. I've got to do it. Otherwise, I'm just going to be more miserable and sinking to really be down." I said,
Yeah.
"Doesn't mean you're going to get to play, but at least you'll understand what's going on and ask them, what do I need to do to get on the field? What's it going to take for me to get on the field? What do I have to do? I mean, I know I'm not striking out a lot. How much extra hitting can I have? What can you do?" But when you have a coach, and this is part of the coach's fault, the coaches don't say anything to him. So that's why I said earlier, good coaches are good listeners. Great coaches are good listeners because
Yes.
they're going to sit there and perceive what's going on. And it sounds like when you work with these people, young people, this is what you're delving into.
Yeah, it is. And it's like I always, so even below that, like not being able to use your voice, that's that's the issue. But why? There's a fear, right? So I have to keep peeling back the layers and teaching my coaches how to do that to really get to the bottom. And it's actually the funny thing is with peer coaches, they'll open up so quickly talking to somebody on their level, right? For me, it takes a little bit longer, but it's peeling back the layers to get to the belief that
Fear, excuse me. You said fear. What's the main fear you seem to find out?
rejection, it's always rejection of whatever it is in life. I'm going to not, if I say it, they're not going to listen. They're going to think I'm stupid. They're not going to like me. It's rejection.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody
exactly.
wants to fit in, but like if you would focus more on loving yourself first and understanding who you really are and you're good, like standing on your own 2 feet solid, then you can go out in the world. But if you don't have that firm foundation of knowing and believing that you're good enough as you are, then you're always going to kind of come up against that. So, but again, we're not teaching that. It's like go say hi to your neighbor. Now say thank you. Make sure you're always like pushing kids to go outward to seek that validation.
Instead of looking inside.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, Kristen, this has been a fabulous interview. I really, really love talking with you. You've got think a great perspective on what's going on with these kids and sports and coaches. If people like to get a hold of you, how can they find you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, probably. I'm redoing the website, but you can still go to nobleones.com and just go to the contact page. You can kind of fill out just a quick name, email, and phone number, and I can reach out and get a hold of you that way.
All right, before we wrap it up, I've got three definitions I'd like you to give me your three words I'd like you to give me your definition of.
Oh, great. Okay, I
No
love this.
pressure, no pressure. First one, what's your definition of winning?
Oh, winning is just being proud of yourself for growing every day, doing something better than maybe you did it the day before.
Awesome. Losing.
Losing is bumping up up against like an outcome that you didn't expect and learning and growing from it as well.
And then finally, what's your definition of self-confidence?
Self-confidence to me is about being able to look in the mirror and love all aspects of who you are. And just like taking the good with the bad and understanding that you're here to evolve as a person and you're confident in the process.
Kristen, this has been fabulous. And I think anybody working with you is going to gain so much about themselves. I really appreciate you being with me tonight. This has been really, really a wonderful interview.
Thanks for having me. Anytime I could talk about kids and emotions all day, every day.
Well, thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed our conversation, visit my website, winnersunlimited.com, where you click on the podcast tab and listen to episodes of my show and connect with me. You can send me an email at drj@winnersunlimited.com. Give me a call at my office, which is 816-561-5556. I am taking on clients all over the place on FaceTime and Zoom. That's winnersunlimited.com. Thanks for joining us tonight.